Gate agent rips up a black girl's first-class ticket, then finds out her father owns the whole airline. The sound of ripping paper cuts through the gate area like a gunshot. All conversations halt. All eyes turn. In the sudden silence, the gate agent's voice is unnervingly calm, almost pleased. "This ticket is invalid. Next passenger, please." 17-year-old Zora Washington stands frozen, watching the remnants of her first-class boarding pass flutter to the counter like confetti. The businessman behind her shifts uncomfortably. The elderly couple to her right exchange glances. No one speaks, no one intervenes. Zora begins, her voice smaller than she intends. "Listen, honey," the gate agent Barbara, according to her name tag, leans forward, pearl necklace swinging, voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that everyone can still hear. "People like you don't belong in first class. Now step aside before I call security. People like you." 3 words that land like blows. 3 words that tell a story Zora knows all too well. The businessman behind Zora clears his throat. The moment stretches, taut as a wire. The gate agent's smile doesn't reach her eyes. And in the next 45 seconds, 3 lives will change forever, an airline will face its reckoning, and a truth buried for 30 years will finally surface. But to understand how we got here, to this moment of public humiliation at Gate 27B of Providence International Airport on a rain-slicked Tuesday in April, we need to go back. Back to breakfast in the Washington household that morning, back to a promise made between father and daughter, and back, eventually, to a night in 1988 when a young pilot made a decision that would echo across decades. This is a story about power, about judgment, about the masks we wear and the assumptions we make. But mostly, it's about what happens when the wrong person's ticket gets torn to pieces on the wrong day, in front of the wrong witnesses. And it all begins with a simple birthday gift, a first-class ticket home. Sunrise spills across the granite countertops of the Washington family kitchen, catching the steam rising from Marcus Washington's coffee mug. At 53, Marcus carries himself with the quiet assurance of a man who has built something lasting. His salt and pepper hair is cut close to his scalp, his button-down shirt crisp despite the early hour. Outside, the Rhode Island spring is finally asserting itself after a brutal winter, and the Japanese maple they planted when they bought this house, back when their fortune was still more dream than reality, is budding red against the pale blue sky. "You're sure you don't want me to drive you?" Marcus asks, checking his watch. Old habits. Even now, with everything he's accomplished, he's pathologically punctual. "I can reschedule the Hopkins call." Zora rolls her eyes, but affectionately. "Dad, I've been flying alone since I was 12. She zips her carry-on with unnecessary force to emphasize her point. At 17, Zora is a study in contrasts, brilliant but uncertain, bold in her opinions but still searching for her place. She has her mother's eyes, people always say, and her father's stubborn chin. What they don't mention is that she has inherited something else, the weight of expectations that comes with being the daughter of Marcus Washington, the man who transformed a struggling regional carrier into Meridian Airlines, now the 6th largest airline in the country. "Besides," she adds, "isn't the whole point that I'm using my birthday present? First class, all by myself, very grown-up." She affects a posh accent on the last words, making her father smile despite himself. "Just checking," Marcus says, raising his hands in surrender. "Your mother would haunt me if anything happened to you." The mention of Eleanor Washington brings a familiar ache to the room. 4 years gone to cancer and still so present in the spaces she left behind. Her photo watches over them from the refrigerator, Eleanor laughing on a beach in Barbados, wind catching her locks, the sun turning her brown skin golden. "Mom would tell you to stop hovering," Zora says gently. Marcus nods, acknowledging the truth in this. "She would." He takes a sip of his coffee, then sets it down. "Call me when you land in Chicago. Aunt Vivian is picking you up, but I want to know you made it." "I will. It's just spring break, Dad. 1 week with Aunt Vive, then back to the grind." She gestures to the stack of AP physics books on the counter. "MIT won't accept B students." "MIT would be lucky to have you if you got straight C's," Marcus counters, but they both know that's not how the world works, especially not for young black women with ambitions in aerospace engineering. The grandfather clock in the hallway, another Eleanor touch, chimes 7 times. Marcus checks his watch again, then stands. "Ray will be here in 15 minutes to take you to the airport." Ray has been their driver for a decade, ever since Marcus decided that Rhode Island winters and Italian sports cars were incompatible. "Got it. I'm ready." Zora gestures to her single carry-on and the small purse slung across her body. "Traveling light, just like you taught me." Marcus smiles, pride and something like nostalgia crossing his features. "I did teach you that, didn't I? Back when Meridian was just 3 planes and a mountain of debt. And now look at you. Big shot CEO with your name on the side of the planes." Zora's teasing hides genuine admiration. She's watched her father build his company from nothing, weathering recessions, industry consolidation, and the whispered and sometimes shouted skepticism about a black man rising to lead a major airline. Marcus's phone buzzes. He glances at it, frowning slightly. Johnson's team moved up the meeting. I need to head in. Crosses to Zora, enveloping her in a hug that smells of his signature sandalwood cologne. Love you, kiddo. Be good for Aunt Vive. Always am, Zora says into his shoulder. She pulls back, suddenly serious. Dad, you know I'm proud of you, right? Like insanely proud. Something complicated passes across Marcus's face, pleasure, pain, something else. I know, baby, I'm proud of you too. He kisses the top of her head like he did when she was small. Now go dazzle Chicago with that Washington charm. As he gathers his briefcase and coat, he pauses at the door. Oh, and Zora, if anyone gives you trouble about that first-class seat, you tell them to call me, directly. Zora laughs. No one's going to give me trouble, Dad. It's 2025, not 1960. Marcus's expression turns thoughtful. Still, you'd be surprised how little some things change. With that cryptic comment, he's gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Zora doesn't know it yet, but her father's words will prove prophetic in just a few hours. And the chain of events they set in motion will reveal just how right he is, about how little some things change, and about how quickly others can. The Providence International Airport gleams with recent renovations, all glass and steel and soaring ceilings designed to make travelers forget they're in a glorified waiting room. Zora navigates security with the ease of someone who's grown up in airports, her boarding pass and ID ready, shoes off before she reaches the conveyor belt, laptop in its own bin. Her father's airline doesn't operate out of Providence, a deliberate choice Marcus made years ago to avoid the appearance of territoriality, so she's flying Continental today. The first-class ticket had been her father's birthday gift last month, a nod to her growing independence. Time you experienced how the other half lives, he joked as he handed her the envelope. Even if it's not on Meridian. At gate 27B, the waiting area is already crowded with the Tuesday morning business travelers and early spring break departures. Zora finds a seat near the window, watching ground crews guide a gleaming white and blue Continental 737 into position. She checks her phone, 40 minutes until boarding. Just enough time to finish the chapter of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower she started last night. She's deep in the dystopian future when a voice cuts through her concentration. Excuse me, is this seat taken? Zora looks up to find an older man gesturing to the empty chair beside her. He's in his 70s, she guesses, with a lined face that speaks of outdoor work and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. His plaid shirt and khakis are neat but well worn. No, go ahead, she says, shifting her backpack to make room. Thank you kindly. He settles in with a small grunt. These old knees aren't what they used to be. Thomas Aldridge, he offers, extending a weathered hand. Zora Washington, she replies, shaking it. His grip is firm but gentle. Washington, eh? Any relation to the Washingtons of Meridian Airlines? The question is casual, but it makes Zora hesitate. Experience has taught her that revealing her father's identity can change interactions in unpredictable ways. Some people become overly interested, others resentful. She opts for vague truth. It's a pretty common name, Thomas chuckles. That it is. I used to be a pilot myself back in the day. Flew for Eastern before they folded, then Continental until retirement. Always kept an eye on the industry, though. Your Marcus Washington, he's done something remarkable with Meridian. You were a pilot. Zora's interest is piqued, her book forgot. Commercial aviation. 37 years in the captain's seat, Thomas confirms, a note of pride in his voice. Started flying crop dusters in Georgia when I was just 16. Military after that, then commercial. Retired in 2010. That's amazing, Zora says, genuinely impressed. I'm actually hoping to study aerospace engineering, MIT, if I can get in. Is that so? Thomas's eyes crinkle at the corners. Smart young lady like you, MIT would be lucky to have you. The echo of her father's words from this morning makes Zora smile. That's what my dad says too. Sounds like a wise man, your father. Thomas glances toward the gate where a harried-looking agent has just taken her position. Ah, looks like they're getting ready to board. You heading to Chicago too? Zora nods. Visiting my aunt for spring break. Wonderful city, Chicago, though I'm partial to the summers there. Winters can be brutal. So I've heard. My aunt says it's finally warming up, though. Thomas nods sagely. April in Chicago, could be 60 degrees, could be snowing, sometimes both in the same day. He chuckles at his own weather joke, the kind that seems universal among men of a certain age. The gate agent's voice crackles over the speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to begin boarding Continental Airlines Flight 1527 to Chicago O'Hare. At this time, we'd like to invite our first-class passengers, active military personnel, and passengers needing special assistance to begin boarding. Thomas raises an eyebrow. That's you, isn't it? First class. Zora feels a small flush of embarrassment, though she's not sure why. Yeah, birthday present from my dad. Well, don't let me keep you. Enjoy those wide seats and hot towels. Zora gathers her things, suddenly aware of the social divide the boarding announcement has created between them. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Aldridge. Thomas, please, and likewise Zora Washington. He gives her a small salute. Good luck with MIT. She smiles and heads toward the gate, joining the small cluster of passengers in the priority lane. Most are middle-aged or older business types in variations of the same navy suit, tapping impatiently on phones or staring into the middle distance with the thousand-yard stare of frequent travelers. The gate agent Barbara, according to her gleaming name tag, greets each first-class passenger with practiced cheerfulness, her blonde bob immaculate, her continental uniform pressed to perfection. She scans boarding passes with machine-like efficiency, her smile never wavering, until she gets to Zora. The change is subtle but immediate. The smile remains, but it cools several degrees. The eyes narrow slightly. The "have a nice flight" she's offered to every previous passenger is conspicuously absent. Boarding pass and ID, Barbara says, the words clipped. Zora hands them over, a faint uneasiness settling in her stomach. She's used to this, the momentary recalibration people do when they see her, the mental adjustment as they try to fit her into whatever category makes sense to them. Usually it passes quickly. Barbara studies the boarding pass, then looks at Zora's driver's license, then back at Zora. Her lips purse slightly. This is a first-class boarding pass, she says, the statement somewhere between a question and an accusation. Yes, Zora confirms, keeping her voice neutral. Seat 3A. Barbara's acrylic nails tap against the counter. And how did you come by a first-class ticket? The question hangs in the air, its implication clear. Behind Zora, someone sighs audibly. It was a gift, Zora says, conscious of the line forming behind her of the eyes now watching this exchange. A gift, Barbara repeats, skepticism dripping from the word. From whom? My father. Zora feels heat rising to her cheeks, anger and embarrassment warring for dominance. She thinks of her father's parting words, if anyone gives you trouble about that first-class seat, you tell them to call me. Directly, she hadn't believed him, had thought he was being overprotective, dramatic even. Now she knows better. I see. Barbara's tone suggests she sees something entirely different than what Zora has stated. She examines the boarding pass again, holding it up to the light as if checking for a watermark. This doesn't look right to me. Excuse me? Zora's voice rises slightly. The ticket. It doesn't scan properly. Barbara runs it under the scanner again, though the machine had beeped confirmation the first time. I think there's been some mistake. There's no mistake, Zora says firmly, channeling her father's boardroom confidence. That's my boarding pass for seat 3A first class. It was purchased legitimately. A muscle twitches in Barbara's jaw. Listen, honey, she says, leaning forward, voice lowered but still perfectly audible to those nearby. People like you don't belong in first class. Now step aside before I call security. The words land like a physical blow. People like you. The naked prejudice in the statement leaves Zora momentarily speechless. And then, with deliberate slowness, Barbara takes the boarding pass between her manicured fingers and tears it in half. Then quarters. The sound of ripping paper seems unnaturally loud in the sudden hush that has fallen over the gate area. This ticket is invalid, Barbara announces, voice rising to its normal volume. Next passenger, please. The torn pieces of Zora's boarding pass flutter to the counter. Time seems to slow as Zora watches them fall, white confetti against the dark surface. Someone gasps. Someone else mutters something unintelligible but clearly disapproving. But Zora begins, her voice smaller than she intends. Barbara's smile is tight, triumphant. If you'd like to purchase an economy ticket for a later flight, you can do so at the ticketing counter. Otherwise, please step aside. The businessman behind Zora clears his throat. Excuse me, he says, addressing Barbara. I saw her boarding pass. It was legitimate. Barbara's smile doesn't waver. Sir, I assure you there was a problem with the ticket. Now may I see your boarding pass? The man hesitates, clearly torn between making a scene and making his flight. Flight wins. He hands over his boarding pass with a last apologetic glance at Zora. Zora stands frozen, humiliation burning through her. The logical part of her brain is already formulating next steps. Call her father, report the incident, get rebooked. But another part, the part that is still 17 and far from home and suddenly, painfully aware of her aloneness, wants to cry. She does neither. Instead, she takes a deep breath and reaches for her phone. Who are you calling? Barbara asks, suspicion evident. My father, Zora says simply. Marcus Washington, the CEO of Meridian Airlines. For the first time, uncertainty flickers across Barbara's face. Meridian, this is a continental flight. I'm aware, Zora says, finding her voice again, but I think you'll be very interested to hear how Continental treats its first-class passengers, especially when they're 17-year-old girls traveling alone. She dials, maintaining eye contact with Barbara. The phone rings once, twice. Barbara's confidence visibly wavers. Please step aside, she says, gesturing to the man behind Zora. You're holding up the line. Zora doesn't move. The phone rings a third time, then connects. Dad, she says, voice steady despite the storm inside her. There's a situation at the airport. 10 minutes. That's how long it takes for Marcus Washington to make 3 phone calls that set in motion a chain of events that will transform Continental Airlines by nightfall. The first call is to Continental's CEO, James Parker, a golf buddy and occasional business rival. The second is to his own executive team at Meridian, initiating a protocol developed for just such incidents, what Marcus grimly calls travel while black. The third is to Ray, the family driver, instructing him to turn around and come back to the airport. Then Marcus Washington does something he hasn't done in years. He leaves a board meeting mid-presentation, ignoring the startled faces of his executive team, and drives himself to Providence International Airport. Meanwhile, at Gate 27B, a different kind of storm is brewing. Ms. Washington, please accept our sincerest apologies. The Continental Gate supervisor, a middle-aged man named Michael who materialized within minutes of Zora's call to her father, is practically wringing his hands. This is absolutely not how Continental Airlines treats its passengers, any of its passengers. Zora stands her ground, phone still in hand. She tore up my ticket, called me people like you. Made me miss my flight. Her voice is steady, but there's a tremor beneath it, not of fear, but of controlled anger. Barbara has been removed from the gate, whisked away by another supervisor with a tight smile and promises of addressing the situation. The remaining gate agents are studiously avoiding eye contact with Zora, focusing intently on boarding the last few passengers for the Chicago flight. We are deeply, deeply sorry, Michael continues. We'll have you on the next flight to Chicago, first class, of course, and Continental would like to offer you vouchers for future travel as a gesture of... I don't want vouchers, Zora interrupts. I want an acknowledgement of what really happened here. Michael blinks rapidly. I'm not sure she discriminated against me publicly because I'm black. The words hang in the air between them. Michael's mouth opens, closes, opens again. Ms. Washington, I assure you that Continental Airlines does not. Save it, Zora says, holding up a hand. She's found her footing now, anger clarifying her thoughts. I don't need corporate platitudes. What I need is for you to admit what happened and make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Thomas Aldridge, who has been watching from nearby, approaches slowly. Excuse me, he says, addressing Michael. I witnessed the entire incident. The young lady is correct. The gate agent's behavior was discriminatory and wholly unprofessional. Michael looks between them, trapped. Sir, I appreciate your... Thomas Aldridge, the older man supplies. Captain retired, I flew for Continental for 23 years. Recognition flashes in Michael's eyes. Captain Aldridge, yes, of course. He straightens slightly. I'll make note of your statement. You do that, Thomas says mildly. And while you're at it, you might want to prepare for the media fallout. 3 passengers were filming the incident on their phones. He nods toward a group of travelers hovering nearby, phones indeed in hand. Michael pales visibly. If you'll both excuse me for a moment, he says, then hurries toward the ticketing desk, already reaching for his radio. Thomas turns to Zora. You handled that admirably, she exhales slowly. Thank you, and thank you for speaking up. Least I could do. Been flying since '68, and I've seen plenty of this kind of thing. Never gets easier to witness. He shakes his head. Your father really Marcus Washington of Meridian? Zora nods. He is. A low whistle escapes Thomas. Well, I'd say Continental is about to have a very bad day. He offers a small smile. For what it's worth, I'm sorry this happened to you. Ms. Washington, Michael has returned, looking even more agitated. Your father is on his way. He's asked that you wait for him in our first-class lounge. He holds out a temporary access card. I'll escort you personally. Zora glances at Thomas. Will you be okay? Your flight? Don't you worry about me. Got a later connection. He gives her another small salute. Go on now, and remember, MIT would be lucky to have you. The words, so similar to her father's from this morning, bring unexpected tears to Zora's eyes. She blinks them back quickly. Thank you, Thomas. As Michael leads her toward the lounge, Zora feels her phone vibrate with incoming texts and social media notifications. The videos are already circulating. By the time her father arrives, Continental discrimination is trending, and the airline's stock has dropped 3 points. And Barbara, the gate agent with the perfect blonde bob and impeccable uniform, has no idea that her split-second decision to tear up a black teenager's first-class ticket is about to connect her to a 30-year-old secret that will change everything. For her, for Zora, and for the man now striding through the terminal with thunder in his eyes and the power to ground planes with a single phone call. The Continental First-Class Lounge is an exercise in muted luxury, all beige leather, brushed steel, and strategically placed orchids. It's designed to whisper wealth rather than shout it, to cocoon its elite travelers in a bubble of calm efficiency far from the chaos of the main terminal. Today, however, the calm is decidedly absent. Completely unacceptable. Marcus Washington's voice carries across the otherwise hushed space, causing heads to turn despite the lounge's privacy-focused design. He stands at the center of a small cluster of increasingly nervous Continental executives who have been summoned to handle the situation. At 6'2", Marcus is physically imposing, but it's the coiled tension in his stance and the precision of his words that command attention. "Mr. Washington," begins a woman in a charcoal suit, Continental's regional director of operations, according to the hasty introduction moments earlier. "I want to personally assure you that what happened to your daughter in no way reflects Continental's values or policies. Your gate agent tore up my daughter's ticket and told her, and I quote, 'People like you don't belong in first class.'" Marcus's voice is controlled but vibrating with fury. "Exactly which part of Continental's values does that not reflect?" The executives exchange glances. Zora, seated in a leather chair nearby, watches the scene with a mixture of emotions. Part of her is deeply satisfied to see her father in full corporate warrior mode defending her. Another part feels strangely removed, as if watching a play where she is both protagonist and audience. "We've suspended the employee in question pending a full investigation," offers a balding man, the station manager. "And of course, we'll be providing full compensation for Ms. Washington's ticket and any inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Marcus cuts in. "Is that what we're calling public humiliation and discrimination now? An inconvenience?" The station manager blanches. "Sir, I didn't mean—" "Where is she?" Marcus demands. "The gate agent, she's been removed from duty and I want to speak with her, now." The executives exchange another round of glances, a silent conversation passing between them. The regional director steps forward. "Mr. Washington, I understand your anger. But I'm not sure that's the best." "Barbara Winters," Marcus says, the name falling into the room like a stone. "That's her name, correct? Barbara Winters, Continental employee for 22 years, previously with Eastern Airlines, currently living in Cranston, divorced, 2 adult children." The stunned silence that follows confirms the accuracy of his information. "How did you?" begins the station manager. "I run an airline," Marcus says simply. "Contrary to what Ms. Winters seems to believe, I know exactly what it's like to be denied a seat I've paid for because of the color of my skin." His gaze sweeps the room. "Now I'll ask one more time, where is she?" Before anyone can respond, the lounge door opens and Michael, the gate supervisor, enters with another man, older, silver-haired, in a pilot's uniform with 4 stripes on the shoulder. The captain of the Chicago flight, Zora realizes. "Mr. Washington," Michael begins nervously. "Captain Reynolds insisted on speaking with you before his departure." Captain Reynolds steps forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Washington, Alan Reynolds, I understand there was an incident involving your daughter and one of our gate agents." Marcus shakes the offered hand, his expression guarded. "That's correct. I've been briefed on the situation and I want to personally apologize to both of you." Reynolds turns to include Zora in his statement. "What happened was inexcusable. I've known Barbara Winters for almost 30 years, and while that doesn't excuse her behavior today, I'd like the opportunity to address this directly." "You know her personally?" Marcus asks. Reynolds nods. "Since our Eastern days, look, I'm not defending what she did, but before this escalates further, and judging by the media presence gathering in the main terminal it already has, I'm asking for a chance to bring her here. Let her face you both directly." Marcus considers this, then looks to Zora. "What do you think?" The question catches Zora off guard. In the whirlwind of the last hour, she's felt alternately like a child needing protection and an adult fighting her own battles. That her father is now deferring to her judgment strikes her as significant. "I think," she says slowly, "that I'd like to hear what she has to say for herself." Marcus nods, decision made. "Captain Reynolds will speak with Ms. Winters. But I want to be clear, this conversation doesn't change the fact that Continental has a serious problem on its hands." "Understood," Reynolds says. He turns to Michael. "Bring her here, and for God's sake, make sure no one tips off the press." As Michael hurries out, the Continental executives cluster in a corner, phones out, damage control in full swing. Reynolds remains standing near Marcus and Zora, his presence creating an island of calm in the turbulent room. "Your daughter's handling of this situation has been exemplary," Reynolds says quietly to Marcus. "You should be proud." I am, Marcus replies, though I wish she hadn't been put in the position to show her composure in the first place. Reynolds nods. Fair enough. He hesitates, then adds, Meridian's reputation in the industry is impeccable. Your focus on equitable treatment and diversity isn't just talk. We could learn from your example. Before Marcus can respond, the lounge door opens again. Michael enters, followed by a woman Zora immediately recognizes, Barbara Winters. Her perfect blonde bob is now slightly disheveled, her uniform still immaculate but somehow diminished. Her eyes are red-rimmed, her mouth set in a tight line. The room falls silent as Barbara takes in the scene, the cluster of executives, Captain Reynolds, and finally Marcus and Zora Washington. Recognition flickers in her eyes as she looks at Marcus, followed by something Zora can't quite identify. Fear, defiance, something else entirely. Ms. Winters, Captain Reynolds says, his tone professional but stern. This is Marcus Washington, CEO of Meridian Airlines, and his daughter, Zora. I believe you owe them both an explanation and an apology. Barbara stands rigid, hands clasped tightly in front of her. For a moment, it seems she might refuse to speak. Then her gaze locks with Marcus's and she goes very still. Marcus Washington, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course I should have made the connection immediately. Marcus's brow furrows slightly. Have we met, Ms. Winters? Barbara laughs, a short, brittle sound. No, we haven't, but I know who you are. She turns to Zora. And I know who you are now, too. I apologize for my behavior at the gate. It was unprofessional and unacceptable. The words are correct, but the delivery is mechanical, rehearsed. Zora feels her father tense beside her. That's it, Marcus asks. You publicly humiliate my daughter, tear up her legitimate ticket, make racist insinuations about people like her, and your response is this, corporate apology. Barbara's expression hardens. What would you have me say, Mr. Washington? That I'm a racist, that I deliberately targeted your daughter. It was a mistake. I misread the ticket. The scanner was malfunctioning. That's a lie, Zora says quietly but firmly. The scanner beeped confirmation, and you specifically said people like you don't belong in first class. What did you mean by that exactly? Barbara's gaze shifts to Zora, something like grudging respect flickering briefly. I misspoke in the heat of the moment. If I offended you. If, Marcus cuts in. There's no if here, Ms. Winters. You did offend her. You discriminated against her. And now you're lying about it. You don't know anything about me, Barbara snaps, her composure cracking. I know enough, Marcus replies. I know you've worked for Continental for 22 years. Before that, Eastern Airlines for 8 years. I know you started as a flight attendant, moved to gate operations in 1995. I know you've received 4 commendations for exemplary service and 2 disciplinary notices, both, interestingly, involving conflicts with minority passengers. Barbara pales. How did you? As I told your colleagues, I run an airline. Information is my business. Marcus steps closer to her. What I don't know, Ms. Winters, is why you looked at my 17-year-old daughter and decided she didn't deserve the seat she had legitimately purchased. I don't know why you felt entitled to humiliate her publicly. And I don't know why you're standing here now, offering insincere apologies instead of honest reflection. Something shifts in Barbara's expression, a hardening, a decision made. You want honest? Fine. I saw a teenager in ripped jeans and sneakers with a first-class ticket. It didn't add up. In my experience, people try to scam upgrades all the time. I made an assumption. I was wrong. End of story. That's not the end, Zora interjects. You specifically mentioned people like me. What people would that be exactly? Barbara's mouth opens, closes. For the first time, she seems genuinely at a loss. Captain Reynolds steps forward. Barbara, for God's sake, be honest. If not with them, then with yourself. Something in his tone causes Barbara to look at him sharply. A silent communication passes between them, decades of history compressed into a single glance. Alan, she says, a warning in her voice. It's time, Barb, he replies quietly. Past time. Barbara's shoulders slump slightly. She looks at Marcus, then at Zora, then back to Marcus again. Mr. Washington, she begins, her voice altered, less defensive now. What happened today was inexcusable. My behavior was discriminatory, unprofessional, and harmful. I acted on biases that I have no right to harbor, let alone express. Your daughter deserved better. Continental's passengers deserve better. I am deeply, genuinely sorry. The shift is so dramatic that Zora finds herself momentarily speechless. Even Marcus seems taken aback by the sudden sincerity. Thank you for that honesty, he says after a moment. It's a start, but it doesn't erase what happened, nor does it address the larger issues at play here. I understand, Barbara says. She hesitates, then adds, there's something else you should know, something that doesn't excuse my actions today but might help explain them. She glances at Captain Reynolds, who nods encouragingly. I knew who you were, she admits. Not immediately, but as soon as your daughter mentioned Meridian. I followed your career since you started the airline. I knew exactly who Marcus Washington was. And that knowledge made you tear up my daughter's ticket? Marcus asks, incredulous. Barbara shakes her head. No, it made me panic afterward because, she takes a deep breath, because of what happened in Charlotte in 1988. The words seem to hang in the air. Marcus goes very still. What are you talking about? He asks, his voice suddenly careful. Barbara looks to Captain Reynolds again, who steps forward. Mr. Washington, Reynolds says gravely, in 1988, you were removed from a first-class seat on an Eastern Airlines flight from Charlotte to Boston. The official reason given was overbooking. The real reason was that a white passenger complained about sitting next to you. A heavy silence falls over the lounge. Zora looks at her father, whose face has gone completely expressionless, a mask she recognizes from business negotiations when he's been blindsided but doesn't want to show it. How do you know about that? Marcus asks finally. Because I was the co-pilot, Reynolds says, and Barbara was the flight attendant who was ordered to ask you to move. Zora gasps softly. Her father had never told her this story. Barbara nods, her expression pained. The gate agent told us a passenger had complained about their seatmate and that we needed to move you. The captain, Jim Lawson, told me to handle it, said to offer you a voucher, make up a story about overbooking. I did it. I moved a qualified passenger from his rightful seat because of his race. Her voice catches. And I've carried that shame for 37 years. So today, Marcus says slowly, when my daughter presented her first-class ticket. It wasn't a calculated act of racism, Barbara says. It was worse. It was instinctive, ingrained. When I saw her young, black, in casual clothes, something in me reverted to that day in Charlotte. To the unspoken rules I'd been taught my entire career, who belongs where, who gets the benefit of the doubt, who gets scrutinized. She looks directly at Zora. I didn't tear up your ticket because you're black. I tore it up because seeing you triggered my own unexamined guilt about what I did to your father all those years ago, about what I've done to other passengers since. The confession lands in the room like a thunderclap. The Continental executives have gone deathly quiet, phones forgotten in their hands. Marcus is the first to break the silence. Ms. Winters, are you saying that what happened to me in 1988 wasn't an isolated incident, that it was policy? Barbara hesitates, glancing at the executives. Tell him the truth, Barb, Reynolds urges. All of it. She straightens her shoulders. It wasn't written policy, but yes, it happened regularly, not just at Eastern. At most airlines, there were codes, ways to identify passengers who might make others uncomfortable. It was understood that first class was to be protected, kept, exclusive. And this practice continued at Continental? Marcus asks, his voice dangerously quiet. Not officially, not for years, but the people didn't change. The culture didn't change, not really. She looks around the room at her colleagues. We just got better at disguising it, more subtle. Random security checks, sudden equipment changes that necessitated receding, mysterious computer glitches with certain passengers' upgrades. The regional director steps forward. Ms. Winters, that's enough. You don't speak for Continental Airlines. No, Barbara agrees. I don't. But I've worked here for 22 years and I know what I've seen, what I've done. She turns back to Marcus and Zora. What I did today wasn't an aberration. It was the culmination of decades of unchallenged bias, and I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. Marcus studies her for a long moment. Ms. Winters, he says finally, 37 years ago, you participated in an act of discrimination against me. Today, you committed one against my daughter. The symmetry would be poetic if it weren't so damned tragic. He turns to the Continental executives. This isn't just about one gate agent or one incident. This is systemic, and it stops now. His voice takes on the unmistakable tone of a CEO accustomed to being obeyed. I want a full audit of Continental's customer service practices, training procedures, and complaint records. I want independent oversight and transparent reporting. And I want Barbara Winters to keep her job. This last statement draws gasps from several people in the room, including Barbara herself. Sir, the regional director asks, clearly confused. Ms. Winters has done something none of you have been willing to do. Tell the truth. Marcus looks at Barbara. You've admitted to discrimination both today and in the past. That's the first step toward change. I want you to be part of the solution. To help Continental identify and address these issues from the inside. Barbara stares at him, visibly stunned. Why would you do that after what I did? Because firing you solves nothing, Marcus says simply. It just makes everyone feel better without addressing the real problem. And because 37 years ago, when you moved me from my seat, I made myself a promise. If I ever had the power to change things, I would. He turns to Zora. What do you think? It's your call. Once again, Zora is struck by her father's deference to her judgment. She looks at Barbara Winters, really looks at her. Not just the perfect blonde bob and the Continental uniform, but the woman beneath, flawed, frightened, but finally honest. I think, Zora says slowly, that change doesn't happen without accountability, and accountability doesn't happen without truth. She meets Barbara's gaze. I want to hear the whole story, from Charlotte to today, all of it. Barbara nods, a mixture of relief and apprehension crossing her features. I can do that. Captain Reynolds checks his watch. My flight is already delayed. I need to make a decision about departure. Marcus turns to him. Captain Reynolds, I appreciate your honesty today. It couldn't have been easy to come forward. Reynolds shakes his head. It's long overdue, and for what it's worth, I resigned my position after that Charlotte flight. Couldn't stomach being part of a system like that. Came back to flying years later, but only after things had started to change. He looks at Barbara. Some of us made different choices. Barbara flinches slightly but doesn't argue. The lounge door opens again and Michael enters looking even more harried than before. Sir, he says, addressing no one in particular, the media situation is escalating. We have reporters asking for statements and the videos from the gate have gone viral. Continental discrimination is trending nationally. The regional director sighs heavily. We need to issue a statement, immediately. Marcus raises an eyebrow. Before you've even heard the full story, before you understand what really happened. Mr. Washington, the director begins, we appreciate your perspective, but Continental has protocols for situations like this. Like what? Marcus interrupts. Like when one of your gate agents publicly discriminates against a black teenager and it gets caught on video. Is that a common enough occurrence to have a protocol? The director has the grace to look embarrassed. That's not what I meant. I know exactly what you meant, Marcus says, and that's the problem. He turns to Zora. What do you want to do now, Zora? We can leave, let Continental handle this their way, or we can stay, hear Ms. Winters out, and perhaps help shape a more meaningful response. Zora considers the options. Part of her wants to walk away to catch the next flight to Chicago and salvage what's left of her spring break. But another part, the part that has watched her father build an airline based on principles of equity and respect, knows this moment matters. I want to stay, she decides. I want to hear the whole story, and then I want to help make sure it never happens again to anyone. Marcus nods, pride evident in his expression. Then that's what we'll do. He addresses the room at large. I suggest we move this conversation somewhere more private, and I suggest Continental's leadership prepare for some uncomfortable truths. As the group begins to disperse, Barbara approaches Zora tentatively. I know you have no reason to believe this, she says quietly, but I am truly sorry for what I did, not just because I got caught, but because it was wrong. Zora looks at her, trying to reconcile the woman before her with the one who tore up her ticket less than 2 hours ago. I believe you're sorry, she says finally. What I don't know yet is whether that's enough. It's not forgiveness, not exactly, but it's an opening, a possibility. And as Zora follows her father and the Continental executives toward a conference room, she realizes that sometimes possibility is all you need to begin changing the world, or at least one airline at a time. The conference room on the executive level of Providence International Airport is designed for efficiency rather than comfort, all straight lines and functional furniture. A large screen dominates one wall, currently displaying Continental's falling stock price in real time. Around the polished table sit the key players in what has become, in the span of 3 hours, a full-blown corporate crisis. James Parker, Continental's CEO, has arrived via helicopter from New York, his typically composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. Beside him sits Marcus Washington, no longer visibly angry but radiating a focused intensity that commands the room's attention. Zora occupies the chair to her father's right, her posture straight, her expression thoughtful. Barbara Winters sits across from them, Captain Reynolds at her side. The regional director and station manager have been joined by Continental's chief diversity officer, hastily flown in from headquarters, and the airline's general counsel, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who hasn't stopped taking notes since the meeting began. So let me make sure I understand correctly, Parker says, his voice carefully controlled. In 1988, while working as a flight attendant for Eastern, you were instructed to remove Marcus Washington from a first-class seat because another passenger objected to sitting next to a black man. Barbara nods. That's correct. The official reason given was overbooking, but that was a fabrication. The flight wasn't overbooked. And Captain Reynolds was the co-pilot on this flight. Yes, Reynolds confirms. Captain Lawson gave the order. I objected, but I didn't stop it. That's on me, Parker turns to Marcus. And you were that passenger. I was, Marcus confirms. 23 years old, first time flying first class, business school interview in Boston. Zora glances at her father, seeing him anew. She's known him her whole life as powerful, successful, respected. It's almost impossible to imagine him vulnerable, being humiliated as she was today. What happened after you were removed from your seat? Parker asks. Marcus's expression remains neutral, but his voice takes on a subtle edge. I was escorted to a seat in economy, offered a voucher for future travel that I declined. When I asked for the reason, I was told the flight was overbooked and that I had been selected for reseating based on check-in time. Which was a lie, Barbara interjects. Yes, Marcus agrees. It was a lie. I knew it then. The first-class cabin was full when we took off, every seat occupied by a white passenger. The message was clear. Parker winces visibly. Mr. Washington, I cannot express how deeply disturbing this is to hear. That kind of discriminatory practice is absolutely common, Marcus supplies. At least it was then, and according to Ms. Winters, variations of it continued well into the Continental era. All eyes turn to Barbara, who straightens in her seat. It became less overt over time, she explains. But yes, there were unspoken practices. Ways to manage the passenger experience that disproportionately impacted minority travelers, especially in premium cabins. The diversity officer leans forward. Ms. Winters, are you suggesting that Continental has systematically discriminated against passengers of color? Barbara chooses her words carefully. I'm saying that individual employees, myself included, have perpetuated biases that resulted in discriminatory treatment. And that the company's culture has, at times, tacitly allowed this to continue by not adequately addressing complaints or patterns. The General Counsel's pen moves faster across her legal pad. Can you provide specific examples? Parker asks. Barbara hesitates, then nods. About 5 years ago, a Middle Eastern family was removed from first class due to security concerns raised by another passenger. There was no legitimate security issue. 2 years before that, an Asian American executive was repeatedly asked to verify his boarding pass at the gate, despite having already been cleared. Last year, a black woman in business attire was questioned about being in the wrong boarding group when she lined up for priority boarding. She pauses. And today, I tore up a valid first-class ticket belonging to a black teenager because, on some level, I still carry the biases that told me she didn't belong there. The room falls silent as her words sink in. These are serious allegations, the General Counsel says finally, and potentially indicative of broader issues that would require comprehensive review. They're not allegations, Zora speaks up, her voice clear and steady. They're admissions. Ms. Winters isn't making claims about Continental. She's telling you what she herself has done and witnessed. All eyes turn to her. Parker nods slowly. You're right, Ms. Washington, and we need to address this head-on. He turns to Marcus. What would you do if you were in my position? The question seems to surprise Marcus. He considers it for a moment. I'd recognize that this isn't about one incident or one employee. It's about culture, systems, and accountability. He leans forward. When I started Meridian, I made a commitment that we would build inclusivity into our DNA, not as a marketing slogan, but as operational practice. We track data on passenger complaints by demographic. We anonymize upgrade and standby lists to eliminate bias. We conduct regular blind audits of customer service interactions. And most importantly, we create an environment where employees can speak up without fear when they witness discrimination. Parker nods thoughtfully. All practices we should consider implementing. He turns to Barbara. Ms. Winters, Mr. Washington has suggested that you keep your position and help Continental address these issues from within. After hearing your admissions today, I'm inclined to agree, though there would need to be appropriate consequences and conditions. Barbara looks stunned. I don't know what to say. Say you'll do better, Zora suggests simply. Say you'll help make sure what happened to me and to my father doesn't happen to anyone else. Barbara meets her gaze. I will, I promise. Parker turns to the diversity officer. I want a full audit of our customer service practices, training protocols, and complaint resolution procedures. Priority 1. He looks at the General Counsel. And I want a transparent public response to today's incident. No corporate doublespeak, no minimizing what happened. The station manager clears his throat. Sir, the media presence downstairs has grown considerably. Several national networks have picked up the story. Parker nods grimly. Of course they have. He turns to Marcus and Zora. I'd like to offer a joint statement, Continental and Meridian, addressing both today's incident and the broader issues it has brought to light. A commitment to specific actions, not just apologies. Marcus considers this. That would be unprecedented. So is this situation, Parker counters. Two competing airlines, united in addressing industry-wide issues of bias and discrimination. That's more powerful than any corporate apology could ever be. Zora watches the exchange with interest. It's like witnessing a chess match between grandmasters, each move calculated yet bearing the weight of genuine conviction. What do you think, Zora? Marcus asks, once again deferring to her judgment in a way that makes her sit up straighter. I think, she says slowly, that what matters isn't what we say today, but what changes tomorrow. She looks at Parker. If Continental is serious about addressing these issues, really addressing them, then yes, a joint statement makes sense, but it has to be backed by action. Parker nods. Agreed, specific, measurable commitments to change. Marcus looks at his daughter with undisguised pride. Then we're in. He extends his hand to Parker, who shakes it firmly. As the executives begin drafting the statement, Barbara approaches Zora again. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" she asks hesitantly. Zora glances at her father, who nods slightly, then follows Barbara to a quiet corner of the room. "I want to give you something," Barbara says, reaching into her pocket. She pulls out a small, weathered business card and hands it to Zora. Zora examines it curiously. It's an old Eastern Airlines card, the logo faded but still visible. On the back, written in now faded ink, is a name, Marcus Washington, and a phone number with a Boston area code. "After your father was moved from first class," Barbara explains, "he handed me this card. He said, 'When you're ready to talk about what really happened today, call me.' I never did. I kept it all these years as a reminder of my failure to do the right thing." Zora stares at the card, this tangible connection between past and present. "Why are you giving it to me?" "Because you deserve to know that your father has been fighting this fight since before you were born. And because I want you to have concrete proof that change is possible. I was the person who helped remove your father from his rightful seat in 1988. Today, I'm the person promising to help make sure it never happens again." Barbara's eyes are bright with unshed tears. "People can change, Zora. Systems can change, but only if we're brave enough to tell the truth about them first." Zora turns the card over in her fingers, feeling its worn edges, imagining her father, younger than she is now, handing it to a flight attendant in an act of quiet defiance and hope. "Thank you," she says simply, tucking the card into her pocket. Across the room, Marcus and Parker are shaking hands again, an agreement reached. The diversity officer is already on her phone, setting meetings in motion. The general counsel continues to take notes, legal frameworks taking shape on her yellow pad. And Captain Reynolds stands by the window, looking out over the tarmac where planes take off and land in an endless cycle, carrying thousands of passengers with their own stories, their own experiences of belonging and exclusion, their own small moments of injustice and resistance. "Your flight to Chicago," he says as Zora approaches. "Continental is preparing a private aircraft to take you whenever you're ready. Your father's idea, I believe." Zora shakes her head, smiling slightly. "Of course he is." She looks up at Reynolds. "Thank you for speaking up today, for telling the truth about what happened to my father." Reynolds nods solemnly. "It was long overdue, too long." He hesitates, then adds, "Your father. After he was moved from first class, he didn't make a scene, didn't shout or threaten. He simply looked me in the eye as he passed the cockpit door and said, 'Remember this day.' And I have every day since." Zora thinks about this, about her father's quiet dignity in the face of humiliation, about the long game he's been playing all these years. Building an airline where such things wouldn't happen, raising a daughter who would stand her ground when they did. "Captain Reynolds," she says, "what made you come forward today, after all this time?" He considers the question carefully. "When I heard what had happened at the gate, I knew immediately it was a repeat of history. And I thought about what your father said to me all those years ago. 'Remember this day.' I realized I had two choices, remember in silence or remember by acting. This time I chose to act." From across the room, Marcus calls out, "Zora, they're ready for us to make a statement." Zora nods to Reynolds and rejoins her father. As they walk toward the door, toward the press conference that awaits them, Marcus places a hand on her shoulder. "You handled all of this remarkably well," he says. "I couldn't be prouder. I had a good teacher," she replies. Then holding up the old Eastern Airlines card Barbara gave her, she adds, "Apparently you've been preparing for this day for a very long time." Marcus looks at the card, recognition and something like wonder crossing his features. "She kept it all these years. As a reminder," she said. Marcus shakes his head slightly. "I never thought she would." He pockets the card carefully. "You know, the day that happened in Charlotte, I almost gave up. Almost decided that the world wasn't going to change, that people like us would always be seen as not belonging in certain spaces." "What stopped you?" Zora asks. "I realized that the only way things would change is if people like us claimed those spaces anyway, if we built new ones when the old ones wouldn't let us in." He smiles at her. "That's why I started Meridian, and that's why when you were born I promised myself you would never have to fight the same battles I did." "But I did today," Zora points out. Marcus nods, his expression sobering. "Yes, and I'm sorry for that, but look what happened because you did." He gestures to the room they're leaving, to Barbara and Reynolds, to Parker and his team, to the framework of change being built in their wake. "Sometimes the battles we hoped would be over still need fighting. The difference is we don't fight them alone anymore." As they step into the hallway, toward the cameras and microphones and the story that is already spreading across social media, Zora thinks about belonging, about who gets to decide who belongs where, about her father, 23 and alone, handing a business card to a flight attendant in an act of faith that someday someone would be ready to talk about what really happened. Today, finally, they are. And as Zora Washington steps before the cameras, her father at her side, she knows that this is only the beginning of a much longer conversation, one that spans generations, one that changes the world one torn ticket, one honest admission, one brave stand at a time. The lights of Chicago twinkle below as the Continental corporate jet begins its descent into O'Hare. Zora gazes out the window, still processing the whirlwind of events that transformed what should have been a routine spring break trip into national news. The press conference had been surprisingly straightforward. James Parker, standing shoulder to shoulder with Marcus Washington, had admitted to the discriminatory incident without corporate obfuscation. He'd outlined concrete steps Continental would take to address bias in customer service, including a comprehensive audit of practices, enhanced training programs, and the creation of an independent oversight committee, with Barbara Winters serving as a key advisor. For his part, Marcus had spoken about the industry's historical challenges with discrimination and Meridian's commitment to partnering with Continental on new best practices. He'd been measured professional, but there had been an undeniable power in his words, in his presence beside the CEO of a competing airline. Zora had been asked to speak as well. Looking out at the sea of cameras and reporters, she'd found her voice and spoken simply about her experience, about the importance of accountability, and about her hope that what happened to her would lead to meaningful change. Social media had exploded. Continental discrimination had been joined by Zora Washington and Airlines for Equality. The story had gone from viral incident to movement in a matter of hours. "Ms. Washington," the flight attendant's voice breaks into her thoughts, "we'll be landing in about 15 minutes. Can I get you anything before we begin our descent?" "No, thank you," Zora replies. "I'm fine." And she is, surprisingly. Despite the emotional roller coaster of the day, she feels a strange sense of calm, of purpose. Something has shifted in her understanding of herself, of her father, of the world they navigate together. Her phone buzzes with a text from Aunt Vivian. "Just arrived at the airport. Can't wait to see you, superstar. Your father called and told me everything. So proud of you." Zora smiles, typing back a quick response. Then another text comes through, this one from her father. "Safe landing. Remember what I said. Love you." What he'd said just before she boarded this hastily arranged private flight was this: "Today you stood your ground in a way I couldn't when I was your age. You're changing the world, Zora. Keep going." The plane touches down smoothly on the O'Hare runway. As they taxi toward the private aviation terminal, Zora gathers her things, including the dog-eared copy of Parable of the Sower she never got to finish at the gate. The flight attendant opens the door and the cold Chicago air rushes in. At the bottom of the stairs stands Aunt Vivian, her arms already outstretched for a hug. Behind her waits a Continental representative, looking nervous but determined to ensure that this leg of Zora Washington's journey goes perfectly. As Zora descends the stairs, she thinks about tomorrow's headlines, about Barbara Winters beginning her new role, about Captain Reynolds returning to the skies with one less burden on his conscience. She thinks about her father, who turned a moment of humiliation into a lifetime of purpose. And she thinks about herself, who she was this morning and who she is now, just 12 hours later. The old Eastern Airlines business card sits in her pocket, a tangible link between past and present. People like you? 3 words that changed everything twice. Once for a young man in Charlotte in 1988, and again for his daughter in Providence in 2025. Aunt Vivian envelops her in a fierce hug. "My God, you've had a day," she whispers. "You okay, baby?" Zora hugs her back, feeling the familiar comfort of family, of belonging without question. "Yeah," she says, "I really am." Over her aunt's shoulder, Zora sees the Continental representative shift nervously from foot to foot. "Ms. Washington," he begins, "on behalf of Continental Airlines, I want to personally—" "It's okay," Zora interrupts gently. "Today's been a day of enough apologies. What matters now is what happens next." The man nods, visibly relieved. "Yes, ma'am, your luggage has been retrieved from the original flight and is already in your aunt's car, and Mr. Parker wanted me to give you this." He hands her an envelope. Inside is a handwritten note from Continental's CEO. "Ms. Washington, thank you for your grace and strength today. Because of you, our airline will be better tomorrow. Please accept this open ticket, first class, anywhere Continental flies, with our guarantee that you and every passenger will always be treated with the respect you deserve." Zora tucks the note away, oddly touched by the gesture. not because she needs another first-class ticket, but because of what it represents. Acknowledgement, accountability, a commitment to change. Ready to go home, superstar? Aunt Vivian asks, linking her arm through Zora's. Home. The word resonates differently now. Home is where you belong without question. Home is where no one tears up your ticket. Home is where you don't have to prove your right to exist in a space. Yeah, Zora says, squeezing her aunt's arm. I'm ready. As they walk toward the parking garage, Zora's phone buzzes again. Another text, this one from an unknown number. This is Barbara Winters. Your father gave me your number. I start my new role tomorrow. I won't let you down. Zora pauses, considering how to respond. Finally, she types, It's not about me. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what my father and I did. Good luck tomorrow. She hits send, then slips her phone back into her pocket next to the old business card with its faded ink and the promise it represented all those years ago. Everything okay? Aunt Vivian asks. Zora looks up at the night sky, at the planes taking off and landing in carefully orchestrated patterns, carrying thousands of people to their destinations. People who deserve to travel with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they look like or where they sit. Yeah, she says, smiling at her aunt. Everything's going to be okay. And for the first time today, she truly believes it. 6 months later, Zora Washington stands at the gate of Meridian Airlines Flight 1988, a flight number chosen with deliberate symbolism, preparing to board for Boston. She's no longer traveling for spring break, but for her freshman orientation at MIT, where she's been accepted into the aerospace engineering program. The gate area at Providence International Airport looks much the same as it did that fateful day in April, but much has changed. A framed, customer bill of rights is prominently displayed, part of the industry-wide standards that emerged from the Continental incident. Gate agents wear small pins with the word respect engraved on them, a Continental initiative that quickly spread to other airlines. And Barbara Winters, no longer in a Continental uniform but in the professional attire of her new role as Airline Industry Inclusion Advisor, stands beside Marcus Washington, reviewing the latest diversity training materials they've developed together. The quarterly numbers are promising, Barbara is saying, showing Marcus a tablet screen with colorful graphs. Customer complaints related to discriminatory treatment are down 40% industry-wide. Continentals are down 63%. Marcus nods approvingly. And the anonymous audits? Even better, gate agents and flight attendants are scoring 90% on equitable treatment metrics, up from 72% 6 months ago. Good, Marcus says, but we keep pushing. 90% means 1 in 10 interactions still shows bias. Barbara nods, determination evident in her posture. Agreed, the next phase of training addresses those subtle biases, the ones people don't even realize they're acting on. Zora approaches them, rolling her carry-on behind her. How's the revolution going? She asks with a smile. Barbara returns the smile, genuine warmth in her expression. Your father won't let us rest until we hit 100%. And even then, Marcus adds, we'll find something else to improve. Zora shakes her head affectionately. Of course you will. She turns to Barbara. How's Captain Reynolds doing with the pilot training program? Thriving, Barbara replies. His first-hand account of the 1988 incident has become a cornerstone of the curriculum. No one falls asleep during that part of the training, I can tell you that. The loudspeaker announces the beginning of boarding for Flight 1988 to Boston. First class and priority passengers may now board. Marcus checks his watch. Right on time. He turns to Zora. Ready for this new chapter? She nods, a mixture of excitement and nervousness on her face. As ready as I'll ever be. MIT won't know what hit them, he says proudly. The Washington family legacy continues, Barbara adds, from airline seats to designing the planes themselves. Zora rolls her eyes good-naturedly. Let me get through orientation first before you have me redesigning jet engines. Marcus laughs, then becomes serious. I wish your mother could see this. She'd be so proud of you, Zora. She'd be proud of both of us, Zora replies softly. Of what we've built together. The gate agent calls for first-class boarding again. Zora hugs her father tightly. I'll call you when I land. You better, he says into her hair. Love you, kiddo. Love you too, Dad. Zora turns to Barbara, extending her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Barbara pulls her into a brief hug instead. Safe travels, Zora. And congratulations again on MIT. Thank you, Zora says, for everything. As she turns to board, she hears her father's voice one last time. Remember, if anyone gives you trouble about that first-class seat. Zora looks back over her shoulder, grinning. I'll tell them to call you directly. She hands her boarding pass to the gate agent, a young man who scans it with a smile and a respectful "Have a great flight, Ms. Washington," and walks down the jetway, her head held high. 6 months ago in this same airport, a gate agent tore up Zora Washington's first-class ticket and told her that people like her didn't belong. Today, she boards another flight, another first-class cabin, but in a world that has begun, slowly but surely, to change. As she settles into her seat by the window, Zora reaches into her pocket and touches the old Eastern Airlines business card she still carries everywhere. A reminder of where they've been and how far they've come. A promise kept. A circle completed. Outside, the afternoon sun glints off the Meridian Airlines logo on the tail of a passing plane. Zora watches it taxi toward the runway, imagining all the passengers inside, each with their own stories, their own journeys, their own rightful places in the world. The flight attendant approaches. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Washington. Can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" "Water would be great, thank you," Zora replies. As the attendant moves on, Zora turns back to the window. Below on the tarmac, her father and Barbara still stand at the terminal window, watching. Marcus raises his hand in a final farewell. Zora waves back, then settles into her seat as the cabin door closes. The captain's voice comes over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Meridian Airlines Flight 1988 to Boston. My name is Captain Thomas Aldridge, and I'll be your pilot today." Zora smiles in recognition. The former pilot she'd met at the gate that day, now flying for her father's airline. Another circle completed. "We've got clear skies ahead," Captain Aldridge continues, "and a flight time of approximately 56 minutes. On behalf of myself and the entire crew, we're honored to have you with us today, every one of you." As the plane begins to push back from the gate, Zora Washington looks out at the vast blue sky opening before her, at all the places she'll go, all the spaces she'll claim, all the futures she'll help build. "People like you," the gate agent had said 6 months ago, not knowing who Zora was or who her father was or what would happen next. People like her. Determined, resilient, unstoppable. The engines roar to life, and Meridian Flight 1988 begins its journey down the runway, gaining speed, gathering momentum, until the moment comes when the wheels leave the ground and the plane soars upward, breaking free of gravity, rising into the endless sky where everyone belongs. We hope you've enjoyed this compelling narrative. If you connected with Zora's journey and the important themes explored in this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content that sparks important conversations. Thank you for watching.